Alright, this has been a long time coming, so I'm just gonna jump right into it. Here we go, guys. Welcome to my spoiler review of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Now, the first thing I want to say going into this is how much of this movie did they show in the trailers? I couldn't believe it. After that first initial trailer that got released back in December, I actually made a point at saying that I was happy that they weren't showing that much in the promotion for this movie. Well, boy, did they fix that. That being said, there was still a couple of surprises that I did genuinely enjoy while watching this, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Now, at the beginning of this movie, I want to say that they did one of the best jobs out of any Jurassic Park film in honestly kicking the movie off with a bang. I mentioned this the first time I saw the opening out at the Jurassic Park 25th anniversary event, and I stand by it now after having seen the film itself 3 times. What's shown in this opening is some of the best directing and cinematography in the entire series. In fact, I'd go as far as saying that it honestly is the best opening out of all of the films for me. When the lightning flashes and the Tyrannosaurus head is revealed towering over the trees in the background, that stuff is literally word for word straight out of the main road attack scene from Michael Crichton's novel. The build and Giacchino's score to when the Rex actually attacks, and the big moment it chomps down on the ladder of the helicopter, all of that stuff is great too. And that particular moment where the Rex actually pulls the chopper down is a scene that was lifted from the storyboards of the original Jurassic Park film that was going to be the first movie's ending. And they utilized it quite well here, and I thought it was really fun. Another thing I want to mention is the subtle odd biblical thing that they did with this genetically engineered Indominus Rex that I haven't seen anyone else talking about, and that's the fact that the mercenaries actually take a piece of rib from this female hybrid in order to create the Indoraptor, which we know is a male, thanks to Dr. Wu calling it a he. And that's not the only time an Adam and Eve comparison is made in this movie either. There's actually one far later in the story as well. After this, we get that awesome line from Ian Malcolm who states that change is like death. You never know what it looks like until you're standing at the gates. Again, this being a quote that was lifted from Michael Crichton, which is the similar, all major changes are like death. You can't see the other side until you're there. Malcolm's role in the movie, while small, was quite enjoyable to me, and it honestly felt similar to how they utilized Richard Attenborough in The Lost World. This is played directly before we go out to meet up with Claire Dearing, who has had a very Sarah Connor-like transformation between this film and the last, and it actually does get explored towards the end with an important decision that she makes. One of the things that I will say bugged me a little during my third viewing of the film was the way in which Zia and Franklin explain what their jobs are aloud to the audience in a couple quick lines of dialogue. I had no problem with it initially, but now I will say that it feels rather unnecessary. So Claire gets a phone call from none other than Benjamin Lockwood, who we learn about very soon. On the way over to his home, we actually get a gorgeous view of the architecture of the Lockwood Manor, and they give Claire a moment to exit the car and look up in awe at the kind of beautiful building that it is. This is important. If you haven't caught on to what the title of this film means just yet, or if you don't necessarily understand all of what has happened inside of the manor, I would highly suggest that you pay close attention to many of the scenes inside of this mansion, or castle, as it should properly be called, if you ever see the movie again, which unfortunately may not be soon because a lot of people have openly bashed this film and really given it a bad reputation in the past few weeks. That being said, pay attention to the way certain scenes are presented within these walls. And here we get to meet Eli Mills, who actually gives John Hammond a canon middle name, which is Alfred. John Alfred Hammond, again, was the character's name from the books, while John Parker Hammond was a name given to him in a deleted scene in The Lost World, and of course, Trespasser. Now, Alfred is the one that matters. So Benjamin Lockwood directly quotes dialogue from Hammond that was at the end of the second film in the series, in which he states that these creatures require our absence to survive and not our help. His goal is to take all of the animals and send them to an island he's deemed as the Sanctuary. This is a place where the animals can live free of any harm. Isla Sorna, for those that don't know, is dead. All the dinosaurs on the island that weren't shipped to Jurassic World were wiped out by a combination of causes, mainly the invasive species of the genetically hybridized Spinosaurus and other animals illegally cloned by InGen and Masrani in 1999. It is also volcanic. If you remember the way in which everyone gets off of the island in The Lost World, they used the operations building, which ran off of geothermal power. And guess where that comes from? It's here that we're also introduced to Maisie rather briefly, who will become a big part of the film later on. But all of this leads to Claire inviting Owen along for the journey, where they meet at a bar in a clear visual callback to Jurassic Park 3. We learn that Owen and Claire didn't work out for some kind of understandable reasons as far as both of these characters go, and we even get some insight into how he feels about Blue. And Owen just doesn't care. He's really going to just leave her to die on the island, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like that about the script. He's kind of a loner until Claire comes back, and when she does, it makes him really address some of the issues he's had with himself in leaving behind all of what he used to do. He doesn't work at Jurassic World anymore, he's no longer involved with Claire, and he's honestly just doing his own thing out here, free of any of these problems. Of course, he changes his mind, and we get to go to the island to go rescue some dinosaurs. Ken Whatley is introduced around this point, and they set him up as if he's going to be some kind of cool new version of Roland, but he definitely is not. Whatley is later revealed to be more akin to Dieter Stark in this film, and it would have been an awesome surprise had it not been for the trailers completely showing that in the later stages of marketing. Now, when they initially tranquilize Blue and then subsequently tranquilize Owen, I actually really got excited, because for the first time ever in a Jurassic movie, I actually felt like the films were evolving far beyond what they've been recycling for the last couple of decades. And when Ken blew on Owen and he dropped to the ground, I got a very Indiana Jones style vibe from that sort of interaction, and being a massive fan of Spielberg and those movies, I really gotta say I enjoyed it. This leads into the pretty funny scene in which Chris Pratt has to wriggle himself to safety from some incoming lava, which I thought was really great. Not gonna lie, it caught me off guard the first time I saw it, and I was worried I wouldn't enjoy it, but it really worked out quite well, and I think a lot of that has to do with just how damn great Pratt is at being funny. He's an extremely good comedic actor. From here, we get the big eruption and that epic wide shot that we saw in the trailers, and then of course the tumble from the cliff. Now, this particular scene is one of the most excellently directed moments of the series. That whole underwater sequence in which Chris Pratt has to dive down and attempt to get Claire and Franklin out, and you see all these different dinosaurs in the background swimming away, and real water is going up to Bryce Dallas Howard and Justice Smith's faces. All of that is one shot. I don't know how they did it, I don't know how dangerous it was for the actors, but I do know it's absolutely amazing and one of the greatest action set pieces that I can pinpoint out of this series. I was very, very impressed by it. Next up is the awesome scenery of Whatley organizing his men to load all of the dinosaurs on the ship, and you hear this epic score by Giacchino that has easily become one of my favorite Jurassic tracks of all time. It's called Raiders of the Lost Isla Nublar, and it is excellent. If you didn't guess that this movie was highly influenced by the Indiana Jones films, well, now you better have a decent clue. And it's also here in which we see Ken rip a tooth out of a stegosaur's mouth and put it along with all of the other teeth that he's been collecting during his trip. That particular animal cruelty bit really made me think back to the Lost World in which Dieter tased that little compy because, well, they're both mean-spirited guys. By the way, you can see a Parasaurolophus in the truck in the back while this is all happening too, which is pretty neat. Now, when everyone gets on the boat and all of the mercenaries turn around to look out at what's going on, we get a truly iconic moment for this series, and it is absolutely my favorite moment of this film. I'm talking about the extinction of the Brachiosaurus. And I am not going to lie, every time I saw the movie over in London, you could hear sobbing from many members of the audience. That moment when the Brachiosaur rears up on its legs like it did the first time you saw it in Jurassic Park right before it dies, oh, that was really heartbreaking, and it's honestly a fitting way to destroy the island. What better way to say goodbye than with the animal that greeted you there all those years ago? It's great, I love it, absolutely think it's incredible. After that, we get the blood transfusion scene in which Claire and Owen have to take the blood from the sleeping T-Rex in order to give Blue a second chance at life. And during this scene, the T-Rex actually wakes up and lets out a mighty roar that's really, really loud and even shakes Owen, who is still on the inside. Interestingly enough, I couldn't help but to think that the crew of the ship would have heard that while they were all doing their own thing. You know what? They really should have heard them after that T-Rex made that really loud noise. In fact, that doesn't make a lot of sense at all. That's really something that I think I can criticize. You know what? Yes, that really shouldn't be let go. Although, I am remembering something similar in another Jurassic Park movie. Wasn't there something that didn't make sense with a human character and one of the dinosaurs in an earlier film? I think it had something to do with Nedry hitting his... Oh yeah! After Nedry gets spit in his eyes from the Dilophosaur, he hits his head and falls to the ground. After he gets up, he sits down on the inside of his Jeep, and suddenly the spitter reveals itself to somehow have already been on the inside. The Dilo couldn't have opened the door or anything, so how did it get in? Well, technically I could assume that the Dilophosaurus just jumped in and waited for Nedry after he fell, just like I could also assume that the guys in the boat didn't think much of the roaring because they just shut the door to the Tyrannosaur cage, and it was pretty loud and did in fact cause it to wake up. But you know what you get when you assume? You make an ass out of you and me. You know what? Sorry guys, I'll take care of this. Alright, so after that we get to go back to the Lockwood Manor and meet up with Gunnar Eversole, Eli Mills, and eventually the wildcard geneticist Dr. Henry Wu. We also learn that Blue is a velociraptor from a different birth group than the other raptors, Delta being a raptor who is obviously more along the lines of velociraptors from previous movies, and Blue being a different version that appears to be far more empathetic and kind of docile at times. This is another idea taken directly from Michael Crichton's original novel, in which Wu had cloned several dinosaurs that were all actually different versions of previously created organisms. For example, the T-Rexes in the first book are actually version 4.1, and the Raptors are on version 3. Changes, or improvements as Wu would probably call them, are made in subsequent renditions of the species. Wu even uses the term iteration in his dialogue with Mills when referring to the development of the Indoraptor, which is another nod to the book. Speaking of the Indoraptor, it's right around now that we see this creature locked away in a big cage underneath the mansion. The well-shot imagery of its outstretched arm reaching to grab Maisie being our first real look. Again, the way in which these scenes inside of the mansion are shot are pretty important and something that you should really pay attention to if you want to fully understand everything going on within the movie. Now, when Claire and Owen wake up on the ship, we're told that the mercenaries are unloading the boat, and all of the animals are en route to be put in the underground prison that is the Lockwood Manor. This brings us back to the inside of the castle, in which Mills is kneeling before Lockwood next to a lit fire. Maisie has alerted the house owner as to what Eli has been up to, which causes him to reprimand his most trusted ally and inform him that he is to call the police and turn himself in. This, of course, leads to Benjamin Lockwood's death, in which Mills has the truly awesome line of, "You know, John Hammond was right. It was an unholy thing that you did. I'm not the only one guilty here." And after smothering him to death, Lockwood's amber cane falls to the floor, shattering in the process, leaving Mills as the head of the house and overseer of the Lockwood estate. If you didn't pick up on this in your viewing of the latest Jurassic World, I'll go ahead and fill you in. Fallen Kingdom is a name that has a few different meanings. The first of which most will probably say is about the fall of Isla Nublar and the destruction of the dinosaur kingdom. Others will also say that it's about the fall of man's dominion and the reinstitution of these ancient species as a major player in the world's ecosystem. In truth, the Lockwood Manor, or castle as it should really be called, is the real Fallen Kingdom. Lockwood was the king and the ruler of this elaborate fortress. Mills was his trusted aide, knight, whatever. He was the guy that was second in command. Maisie, someone of royal blood to the Lockwood estate, is obviously the princess, and the Indoraptor, which is housed in an underground cage, a dungeon of sorts, is the dragon. Mills turns out to be someone far more nefarious than any previous Jurassic villain in the franchise, and as such has a lot more crazy stuff to do before this movie is over. As of now, the king is dead. Long live the king. And as soon as this transition of power is carried out, the invaders, or hyenas if you've seen The Lion King, begin to storm the place. Here is everyone who's come to buy all of the dinosaurs that are about to go up for auction. Maisie discovers her grandfather dead in his room, and upon Mills' own discovery, he calls in her nanny Iris to make the business owners passing public. He also goes out of his way to relieve Iris of her care over Maisie, and actually tells her that he is her rightful guardian now, and as such will take care of her by himself. After being discovered by Whatley, Owen and Claire are thrown in the dungeon and orchestrate a nice little breakout with the Stygimoloch. While the auctioning is going on, we see Ankylosaurus, Allosaurus, and Baryonyx all being sold off to these weapons dealers. Around this point, they introduce the prototype Indoraptor to their bidders, and actually put it up for auction as well. This upsets Wu, who really feels as if his creation has yet to be completed and doesn't want it out in the world just yet. His major fear seems to be of others taking his research and capitalizing off of it the same way Eli is doing now. Mills, it turns out, only cares about one thing, which is higher profits, and he decides to sell the Indoraptor despite Wu's displeasure. The Stiggy breaks up the party, and Owen lays the smackdown on a lot of these guys during an epic tracking shot that really feels like it could have been plucked out of The Last Crusade. Finally, this leads into Wheatley's epic scene with the Indoraptor. Now, Ken is only interested in his bonus during this scene and makes a point of calling out for it while the room is nearly empty. After believing that he'd tranquilized the animal, he goes inside to rip one of the teeth from the Indoraptor's mouth just so he can complete his necklace. The hybrid animal gives a small smirk during this encounter for comedic effect just before he bites into Wheatley's arm and severs it from his body. This particular death is taken straight out of the Lost World novel, and it happens to be the unlucky fate of paleontologist George Baselton, who'd entered the Rex nest quite foolishly in that book. The smile, it seems, was done to prepare kids for such an eminently violent sequence, which some would say is cartoony. In fact, a lot would call Wheatley, Gunnar, and Mills cartoony in several reviews that I'm sure you've seen. Come to think of it, they did all have a rather mustache-twirling air about them, And they are all honestly written one-dimensional with kind of a limited character development. And each villain is quite stereotypical when you think about it too. Oh my god, that's a big issue. I can't believe I gave this film an A+. Now, okay, this just has to be addressed. Although, come to think of it, wasn't there another point in a JP movie with a character like this? Something about a guy wanting money? A stereotypical caricature of a fat computer nerd that wasn't well paid? I guess he was a bit one-dimensional, but he most certainly wasn't cartoony. No, if he was, he'd be criticized as well. Although, he did have some comedic elements around the time of his death. In fact, didn't he slip down the waterfall and lose his glasses? Wasn't that right before he played peekaboo with the dilo? Didn't he make a few one-liners with that little dino looking up at him? He couldn't be cartoony at all though. No, all he said was, "Thought you were one of your older brothers. You're not so bad. Do I look like I have any food? Fetch the f***ing stick. I am going to run you over when I come back down." Jeez, I suck at these reviews. Well, we can't be hypocritical here. If this is a serious problem, we gotta be fair. Don't worry, I'm on it. Anyways, so after Whatley dies, we get to see Owen and Claire meet up with Maisie, and they go on a run throughout the mansion. After meeting up with Mills, he tells her what she really is, while also calling Owen and Claire the parents of the new world, another Adam and Eve parable. He wants Maisie to come with her in what is alluded to being a sort of prototype or proof of concept for further exploitation his company could have as well. This is cut short once the Indoraptor attacks and we get an epic chase of cat and mouse that is expertly well shot and really beautiful to look at. Some of my favorite moments of tension and terror in this series come from this stuff, especially the moment in which Claire is stabbed by the sickle claw of the beast. This all comes to a head when Blue jumps on the hybrid, causing it to fall to its death on the Triceratops skull, which was just plain badass. Now, after that, we get Franklin doing his tech stuff, making sure that he can man the controls until Owen, Claire, and Maisie make their way to the control room. Here, Claire has a pretty important decision to make in which she decides against the idea of freeing the dinosaurs. However, the clone princess rejects the idea of leaving all the animals to die and instead lets them live by pushing the button and releasing them into the world. Having Maisie push the button and cause the mainland escape of the dinosaurs was really a powerful move. It was one that made a lot of sense for her character, as she sees them as having the same right to exist as herself, the human clone. If Claire pushed the button, it just wouldn't have worked. And that being said, I'm starting to think about all of the negative feedback over this development in the screenplay. Some have called it quite sloppy to have this reveal and only go here with it. And you know, the only thing they did with this clone reveal was make Maisie unleash the animals onto the public, which means her character reveal only served the purpose of furthering the plot. My God. You know what? That could very well be critiqued. Someone could easily call that lazy writing. And yet, I'm remembering something from a movie I saw once a while back. It's a classic that had some sort of character reveal that was used in the last act of the film. Something sudden that didn't really serve any purpose other than to advance the story. What was it? Something about a little girl being a hacker, I think, and then being placed perfectly in front of a computer screen just so she could restart the park system that we just recently learned she had the ability to do. Alright, and now for the really cool stuff. Eli Mills Death. Now, at first you think it's the compies that are going to get him, and then they use the imagery of the Carno in front of the floodlights, which is a cool allusion to the novel, just before Rexy comes out of nowhere and rips him apart. The Carno comes in and rips his leg off, which falls to the ground, and all of the compies gather around it and start nibbling the severed limb. You gotta catch that, it's in the right-hand corner. Oh, and the T-Rex gives that mighty roar that we all saw in JP1. Ah, that was awesome. And then, Blue just leaves. She decides that it's best to live alone than caged with the humans. And we get the beginning of our large Jurassic World. What Crichton penned at the start of his novels has finally begun to take shape in the film universe. And the manifestation of what they talked about in that lunch scene from Jurassic Park is finally underway. Look, I'm making jokes here. Jurassic Park isn't a D. All of you guys should know that that movie is my favorite film of all time. If it wasn't, I likely wouldn't be doing this right now. I love that film and I know it's great, but I feel the same about Fallen Kingdom as well. I want to ask you all a quick question. Is it honest of a reviewer to critique something they take issue with in a sequel while turning a blind eye to the same sort of error that could easily be traced back to the original? When I finished my initial review of this film, I stated that I can't find a single thing wrong with this movie that wasn't already a shortcoming of Jurassic Park. My point is, I couldn't come on here and give Jurassic Park an A+ without giving Fallen Kingdom its due. The issues within that film can be traced back entirely to things that you could criticize within the first Jurassic Park, or honestly, any of the Indiana Jones movies. In fact, let's talk about those. Trevorrow has said that these new movies are supposed to be Amblin films. And let's compare Trevorrow's work with the writing of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom to what Spielberg did with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Characters like Franklin and Siehda. You could honestly say that they're pretty similar to Marcus Brody and Sala in Last Crusade. Those people help with the plot in a few ways that could have been incorporated into other characters, but they weren't. And you could say that, well, it's because they're comedic relief, but if you're talking about Last Crusade, you've already got Indiana Jones. You've already got Indiana Jones's father that they do use comedically. Why do you need Sala? Why do you need Marcus Brody? Well, they're used the same way in that film that they use Siehda and Franklin in this. Is Last Crusade lacking in something? Serious question. And with all of that being said, I'm not the only one that thinks this highly of the film. There have been quite a few who've agreed with much of what I said here. Now, if you look at the negative response for this film, or the positive response for Jurassic Park for that matter, a lot of it is copy and pasted, as if it came from one person's mouth and was immediately downloaded into everyone else's subconscious. And again, this is no disrespect, every opinion is always valued here. But at a certain point in time, I do believe some of this to be rather hypocritical. In fact, I'll just leave you with this. Human beings never think for themselves. They find it too uncomfortable. For the most part, members of our species simply repeat what they're told and become upset when they're exposed to any different view. The characteristic human trait is not awareness, but conformity. We are stubborn, self-destructive conformists. Any other view of our species is just a self-congratulatory illusion. Michael Crichton. That being said, I am going to change my grade. I've just got to be honest. That dialogue between Franklin and Siehda at the beginning was just too much. You get an A. Now before I go, I want to thank my game wardens, as well as all of my InGen executives. I'd also like to thank my park workers and InGen hunters as well. It means the world to me that you guys enjoy what I do so much, and I seriously am eternally grateful for every ounce of support that you've shown me. I could never say thank you enough. Now, I'd like to thank you all for watching this video, and hope that you all enjoyed today's content. If you feel like I deserve it, I'd appreciate the like, and hope that you'll consider subscribing if you're interested in hearing from me again. I'll see you all in the next video, guys. And as always, take it easy.